जय राधा माधव कुंज बिहारी गोपीजन वल्लभा गिरिवरधारी यशोदनंदन व्रजजनरंजन यशोदनंदन व्रजजनरंजन यमुनातीरा वनचारी यमुनातीरा वनचारी जय राधा माधव कुंज बिहारी गोपी जनवल्लभ गिरिवरधारी यशोदानंदन व्रजजनरंजन यशोदानंदन व्रजजनरंजन यमुनातीरा वनचारी यमुनातीरा वनचारी जय राधा माधव कुंज बिहारी जय राधा माधव कुंज बिहारी जय ओम श्रीपाद परमहंस प्रवचकाचार्य अष्टोत्तर श्रीमद डिवाइन ग्रेस ऐसे भक्ति वेदांत स्वामी श्री प्रभुपाद की जय। जय ओम श्रीपाद परमहंस प्रवचकाचार्य अष्टोत्तर श्रीमद डिवाइन ग्रेस भक्ति सिद्धांत सरस्वती ठाकुर श्री प्रभुपाद की जय। अनंत कोटि वैष्णव वृंद की जय। नामाचार्य श्री हरिदास ठाकुर की जय। ग्रंथराज श्रीमद भागवतम की जय। ऑल गुरुस assembled devotees Hare Krishna. All gurus assembled devotees Hare Krishna. All gurus assembled devotees Hare Krishna. All glories, all glories, all glories to Shri Shri Guru and Gauranga. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Narayanam Namaskrityam Naram Chaiva Narottamam Devim Saraswatim Vyasam Tato Jayamudhiraye Nashtapraye Shabhadreshu Nityam Bhagavata Sevaya Bhagavatir Uttama Shloke Bhaktir Bhavati Naishtiki Krishnaya Vasudevaya Devaki Nandanaya Cha Nandagopa Kumaraya Govindaya Namo Namaha. Hare Krishna. Reading from Srimad Bhagavatam, Canto 6, Chapter 5, entitled Narad Muni Cursed by Prajapati Daksha, and verse number 37. ऋणैस्त्रिभिरमुक्तानाम् अमीमांसिता कर्मणाम् विघातश्रेयस पापा लोकयोरुभयोकृता ऋणैस्त्रिभिरमुक्तानाम् अमीमांसितकर्मणाम् विघातश्रेयस पापा लोकयोरुभयोकृता ऋणैस्त्रिभिरमुक्तानाम् अमीमांसितकर्मणाम् विघातश्रेयस पापा लोकयोरुभयोकृता ऋणैस्त्रिभिरमुक्तानाम् ऋणैस्त्रिभिरमुक्तानाम् अमीमांसितकर्मणाम् श्रेयस पापा लोकयोरुभयोकृता ऋणैस्त्रिभिरमुक्तानाम् अमीमांसितकर्मणाम् विघातश्रेयस पापा लोकयोरुभयोकृता. माताजी's ऋणैस्त्रिभिरमुक्तानाम् अमीमांसितकर्मणाम् विघातश्रेयस पापा लोकयोरुभयोकृता. Rinai from the debts. Tribi, three. Amuktanam, of persons not freed. Amimamsita, not considering. Karmanam, the path of duty. Vighata, ruin. Shreyasa, of the path of good fortune. Papa, O most sinful. Bracket Narad Muni. Lokayo, of the worlds. Ubhayo, both. Krita, done. Translation and purport by His Divine Grace, Sri Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada. Translation. Prajapati Daksha said, my sons are not at all freed from their three debts. Indeed, they did not properly consider their obligations. O Narad Muni, O personality of sinful action, you have obstructed their progress toward good fortune in this world and the next, because they are still indebted to the saintly persons, the demigods and their father. Purport. As soon as a Brahmana takes birth, he assumes three kinds of debts. Debts to great saints, debts to the demigods, and debts to his father. The son of a Brahmana must undergo celibacy, brahmacharya, to clear his debts to the saintly persons. He must perform ritualistic ceremonies to clear his debts to the demigods. And he must beget children to become free from his debts to his father. Prajapati Daksha argued that although the renounced order is recommended for liberation, one cannot attain liberation unless one fulfills his obligations to the demigods, the saints, and his father. Since Daksha's sons had not liberated themselves from these three debts, how could Narad Muni have led them to the renounced order of life? Apparently, Prajapati Daksha did not know the final decision of the Shastras, as stated in Srimad Bhagavatam 11.5.41. Devarshi bhutaptinram pitrinam na kin karonayam rinicha rajan sarvatmanaya sharanam sharanyam gato mukundam parihartakartam. Everyone is indebted to the demigods, to living entities in general, to his family, to the pitas, and so on. But if one fully surrenders to Krishna, Mukunda, who can give one liberation, even if one performs no yagyas, one is freed from all debts. Even if one does not repay his debts, he is freed from all debts if he renounces the material world for the sake of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, whose lotus feet are the shelter of everyone. This is the verdict of the Shastra. Therefore, Narad Muni was completely right in instructing the sons of Prajapati Daksha to renounce this material world immediately and take shelter of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Unfortunately, Prajapati Daksha, the father of the Haryashvas and Shavalasvas, did not understand the great service rendered by Narad Muni. Daksha, therefore, addressed him as Papa, the personality of sinful activities, and a sadhu, a non-saintly person. Since Narad Muni was a great saint and Vaishnava, he tolerated all such accusations from Prajapati Daksha. He merely performed his duty as a Vaishnava by delivering all the sons of Prajapati Daksha, enabling them to return home back to Godhead. Om Jnana-timirandhasya Jnananjana-shalakaya Chakshurunmilitam Yena Tasmai Shri Guruve Namaha Shri Chaitanya Manobhishtam Sthapitam Yena Bhutale Swayam Rupa Kadamayyam Tadati Shvapadantikam Vandeham Shri Gurum Shri Yuta Padakamalam Shri Gurun Vaishnavamscha Shri Rupam Sagrajatam Sahagana Raghunathanvitam Tam Sajivam Sadvaitam Savadhutam Parijana Sahitam Krishna Chaitanya Devam Shri Radha Krishna Padan Sahagana Lalita Shri Vishakhanvitamscha Nama Om Vishnapadaya Krishna Pristhaya Bhutale Srimate Bhaktivedanta Swami Nitinamine Namaste Saraswati Deve Gauravani Pracharine Nirvishesha Shunyavadi Paschatya Deshatharine Nama Om Vishnapadaya Krishna Pristhaya Bhutale Srimate Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati Nitinamine Vancha Kalpa Tarubhyascha Kripa Sindhu Bhaivacha Patitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha Namo Mahavadanyaya Krishna Prema Pradayate Krishnaya Krishna Chaitanya Namine Gauratvashe Namaha Panchatattvatmakam Krishnam Bhaktarupa Swarupakam Bhaktavataram Bhaktakyam Namami Bhakta Shaktikam He Krishna Karuna Sindhu Dinabandhu Jagatpate Gopesha Gopika Kanta Radha Kanta Namostute Tapta Kanchana Gaurangi Radhe Vrindavaneshwari Vrishabhanu Sute Devi Pranamami Hari Priye Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shrivasadi Gaura Bhakta Vrinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare. Hare Krishna. Seeking the blessings of all Vaishnavas. I heard there are a lot of sadhus who have come for Sadhu Bhushan camp. We have been celebrating a lot of festivals, particularly this week. There was Ekadashi, there was Rukmini Dwadashi, there was Jayanand Prabhu's disappearance day, Lord Narasimha's appearance, and yesterday was Radharaman's appearance, Madhavendra Puri's appearance. Very special occasions. So now we are continuing with our regular discussion on Srimad Bhagavatam. This is from Canto 6, Chapter 5, entitled Narad Muni Cursed by Prajapati Daksha, and verse number 37. So we'll briefly discuss a recap of this particular context so that we are in understanding what is going on, and eventually we'll discuss about some glories of Prajapati Daksha. We'll discuss Daksha versus Narad Muni. What was the difference, distinguishing factors between Daksha and Narad Muni. We'll discuss duties of a father, particularly with respect to the son's marriage. And this particular verse talks about freedom from 3 debts. We'll talk about this. And we'll also discuss about Daksha's faults, ending with Narad Muni's compassionate heart of tolerance. So just a brief recap. So basically, this is the 6th canto, where initially first 3 chapters are Ajamil section. And after that, Parikshit Maharaj is requesting from Narad Muni that he wants to know the further details of the process of creation. So certain aspects had already been explained in the 3rd canto of Srimad Bhagavatam. So here it is something like a secondary creation. Second time, he wanted to know further details on that. So as part of that, Shukadeva Goswami explains that Prachetas, when they came out of the sea, so the Prachetas were performing severe austerities under the water, and they were already directed by Lord Shiva. By the grace of Lord Shiva, they achieved the mercy of Lord Vishnu, and their father Prachini Barhi was still performing yagyas. So he was somehow involved into karma kanda. So Narad Muni was very particular in delivering the father. So the Prachetas were already delivered by the grace of Shiva, and eventually they met Lord Vishnu as well. But Prachini Barhi was remaining, so Narad Muni preached to him. Prachini Barhi, when he was delivered, when he eventually went to the forest, so then it is described there was Ajarakta, there was no king to rule. As a result of that, there were a lot of trees, vegetation, which the land became like a forest. So when the Prachetas came out after performing the penance from the waters, when they saw so much forest area, so they just, with their tapas, they just burned the trees. And as a feeling compassion for the trees, the moon god, he comes forward and stops them from burning the further trees, and also offers Marisha, the daughter of Pramlocha, as you can take her as your wife. So that's how the Prachetas get married to Marisha, and all this, Prabhupada describes all the semen of the Prachetas, 10 of them, and with Maricha, Daksha is born. So this is Daksha part 2. Daksha part 1 was in Swayambhu Manu's time, where unfortunately he had offended Lord Shiva, and as a result of which he got a goat's head, and eventually he gave up that life also. So now this is the 6th Chakshusha Manu, 6th Manvantara, where this is the Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur describes, he is the same Daksha. It's like that, that's why Daksha part 2. And he is still involved in having the same mentality, and still extremely interested in the process of creation. So that is how he comes again. So this is Daksha, is born as the son of Prachetas from Marisha. So although we find definitely in this particular verse, Daksha is now, it's a series of verses where Daksha is accusing Narad Muni. Of course, this is not acceptable at all, because Narad Muni is a personality of a very great stature. He's a Mahajan, and as an Uttamadhikari, you can say he is the preacher of so many great saints, including Prahlad Maharaj and Dhruva Maharaj and so many others, even Vyasadeva as such. So what is going on is not acceptable. At the same time, Prajapati Daksha also was not an ordinary person, because what we are, the whole section that we are dealing with, because as part of learning about the glories, because this particular section we will try to hear about the glories as well, and Daksha versus Narad Muni, what is the distinguishing feature, and towards the end we will also see Daksha's faults. What was the fault that Daksha committed? What is happening here? So it is described that Brahma had created 9 personalities for the function of creation, and as part of that, one of them is Daksha. So he is no ordinary person. He is directly created by Lord Brahma himself. And also it is described that when Daksha wanted to create progeny, when he saw that the living entities were not expanding further, then he personally underwent penances, austerities. So he was quite cultured, just like we hear about Brahma, when he was sitting on the lotus, and when he was sort of confused, seeing the darkness all around, and seeing the lotus swaying, when he heard tapa, Brahmaji immediately sat to perform tapasya. Similarly, Daksha also has been performing austerities, and he also offered prayers of Hamsaguhya prayers. The previous chapter, 4th chapter, described about that. And as a result of that, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Lord Vishnu, was personally pleased and gave darshan to Daksha. So the beautiful Supreme Lord Vishnu, on his 8-handed form, standing on Garuda, very beautiful scene, standing on Garuda, is coming to give darshan to Daksha. So that way we can see that the Supreme Lord has been pleased with him by his austerities, as well as by his offering of Hamsaguhya prayers. And not only that, like it is described for the Prachetas, Jai Shri Shri Radha Vrindavan Chandra Bhagavan ki Jai, Shri Shri Jagannath Baldev Subhadra Ramaiya ki Jai, Shri Shri Gaur Nithai ki Jai, Shri Prabhupada ki Jai. So like it is described that the moon god personally gave Marisha, the daughter of Pramlocha, she was raised by the trees and she was offered to the Prachetas. Whereas in the case of Daksha, we see that the Supreme Personality of Godhead himself arranged for Daksha's wife. The Prajapati, there was Panchajana, so his daughter as Asikni. The Supreme Lord Vishnu himself arranged the marriage for, or we can say offered the wife for Daksha. It is something like Kardama Muni. Lord Vishnu personally arranged the marriage for Kardama Muni by saying that Swayambhu Manu will be coming soon and he will offer his daughter Devahuti to you. So you accept her in marriage. Similarly here, Daksha, for him, Asikni has been arranged by Lord Vishnu himself. Not only that, Daksha is said to be, of course, the very word Daksha means expert, which is he was expert in begetting children. And in one of the purport, Prabhupada very clearly explains that this is, strictly speaking, this is not a glory, that he was expert in begetting children, but nonetheless, the very word expresses that he was expert. At the same time, in one of the purports, Prabhupada explains that Daksha is trying to benefit the conditioned souls by begetting them to give them a life with a chance for liberation. It means, in one sense, we see Daksha is doing a great service, because at the time of dissolution, the living entities enter into the body of Karanodakshaya Vishnu, Mahavishnu. So, again, when creation happens, the living entities who take shelter of Karanodakshaya Vishnu have to again get a body. So, just like every living entity have to be grateful to our own parents for giving us this body. Although the body is temporary, but at the same time, this temporary body can be utilized very precisely in the service of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. So even for getting the body, one can be very grateful. So, but in that sense, Daksha is very much responsible at the time of creation, that he is giving the living entities a chance to take birth, so that there is a chance for liberation. Of course, that is always left up to the individual living entity in terms of whether they take Nivritti Marg or Pravritti Marg, or unfortunately do not even bother about self-realization. But nevertheless, Daksha is giving a chance for all the living entities to again get birth, get again the bodies. Also, it is described that we have been hearing about Haryashva's 10,000 sons, the first set of 10,000 sons who were delivered by Narad Muni. And when Daksha heard this, he was quite upset, he was quite anxious. At the same time, he thought, let me again further have progeny. So he had 1,000 more sons, Shavalasvas. And when he had 1,000 more sons, it is described that, as part of the glory, Daksha was still cultured and wanted to ensure that his children still get the training. Before they go for progeny, they should undergo austerities. And he even took the risk of sending them to the same place. In spite of knowing that what might happen, but he took that risk, he took that chance, because he was more conscious of giving training to the children, so that they undergo austerity before actually going for progeny. So that way he is quite cultured from that perspective. But when we compare Daksha with Narad Muni, he was no match. It is like something like a Kanishta Adhikari versus a Uttam Adhikari. So Daksha, when he is compared with Narad Muni, then he really falls short. It's like how the scriptures explain, it's like a firefly, in front of the moon or in front of the sun. So because Narad Muni's qualities is very, very extraordinary, and Daksha thought himself that because his plan was foiled of making his children as grahasthas, his plan was foiled. That is why he was extremely angry, and without knowing the stature of Narad Muni, he just expressed his anger, and ultimately he ended up cursing Narad Muni. So it is described that if we compare Daksha with respect to Narad Muni, then Daksha is one who is created for the function of progeny, whereas Narad Muni is created in order to propagate devotional service. Narad Muni appeared from the heart of Brahma. Daksha is created for further progeny, whereas Narad Muni is for propagating devotional service. From the post perspective, Daksha is just a Prajapati, function of creation, whereas Narad Muni is one of the Mahajans, one of the 12 Mahajans. So a very great, extraordinary quality that Narad Muni possesses. Also we see that Daksha, as this Daksha part 2, this 6th Chakshusha Manu, Daksha is getting Darshan of Lord Vishnu once. Lord Vishnu comes in his 800 form, standing on Garuda, gives him that beautiful darshan. But Narad Muni is a regular visitor to Vaikuntha. He can have darshan multiple times. He's a transcendental spaceman, as Srila Prabhupada explains. So he has multiple darshans of Lord Vishnu. Not only that, it is described that, Prabhupada explains very beautifully, Daksha is expert in begetting children, whereas Narad Muni is expert in delivering children. All those whom he begot, Narad Muni is expert in delivering them. And also it is explained that, actually in the next purport, Prabhupada explains, Prabhupada refers to Daksha as a karmi. In the very next purport, in verse 38, Daksha is referred to as a karmi from the perspective of the mentality, that he's actually angry on a great saint and even cursing him. And for the philosophy that he had, his philosophy was that one can develop natural detachment by performing austerities as well as experience. So Daksha's point of view was that they could have actually underwent experience. He was also very much for austerities. At the same time, he wanted them to undergo experience. Whereas Narad Muni's philosophy is develop detachment by avoiding entanglement. If the sons were so ripe, the Haryashvas, 10,000, it's like for a preacher it is a great feast, to see 10,000 boys who are ready for dedicating their lives. So Haryashvas 10,000 was first lot, and the second lot of 1,000 Shavalasvas, that also Narad Muni did not leave. It's like ending with a sweet. So both was there. So Narad Muni wanted this developing detachment by avoiding entanglement. So while Prabhupada refers to Daksha in the next purport as a karmi, Narad Muni, of course, he is a great Uttam Adhikari, pure devotee. Personality was delivered even Vyasdev and Dhruva and Prahlad and all that. And finally, we can see Daksha is in one sense very self-centered, whereas Narad Muni is very selfless. Daksha is only concerned about, I created 10,000 sons, I created 1,000 of them, I ensured that they should perform austerities before progeny, and you foiled my plan. But Narad Muni is so selfless, the entire dynasty has been delivered by Narad Muni. Right from, you see, 5th canto, Priyavrat, and then Uttanapad, Swayambhu Manu's family, Priyavrat and Uttanapad. Priyavrat was personally delivered. He was the spiritual master of, Narad Muni was the spiritual master of Priyavrat. Eventually we see Uttanapad's son, Dhruva Maharaj, was delivered by Narad Muni. Down the line coming, then we see Prachini Bhari. Prachetas were already delivered by Lord Shiva and Lord Vishnu, so he didn't touch them. He didn't need to intervene. But his father was left, so Prachini Bhari, again Narad Muni went to preach. Then we see the Pracheta's son as Daksha, and Daksha's sons were already delivered again by Narad Muni, Haryashvas and Shavalasvas, and now he didn't want to leave the chance of delivering Daksha also. This is a great preacher. No stone unturned. As much opportunities are available, sons also are there, and father is also ready, then you can take father also. That was Narad Muni's mood. So he was extremely compassionate. So Prabhupada explains the duty of a father with respect to the son's marriage. So it is discussed that the desire for getting married, this is a desire which one can oppose even one's father or even one's spiritual master. This particular desire which is there, it is explained, this is like sort of sanctioned in the scriptures. One can oppose one's own father or one's own spiritual master. We have the 4 Kumaras who, when asked by Brahma, Lord Brahma said, why don't you also help in the function of creation? And the 4 Kumaras were happy to remain as they were, as a small child, and they expressed disinterest in marriage, and that was sanctioned as well. Of course, Brahmaji was angry, but still, nonetheless, that was acceptable. Similarly, we see Bhishma Dev. Bhishma Dev did not want to get married, but eventually, when Amba approached even Parashuram that you please ensure, you're the spiritual master, can you help me? And Parashuram also ordered Bhishma Dev that you have to get married. But Bhishma Dev says he opposed that, and as a result of that, Bhishma and Parashuram even had a fight, and still at the end Bhishma remained unmarried. So that is, he opposed the spiritual master as well. Similarly, we see Priyavrat right in the 5th canto itself. Of course, in the case of Priyavrat, he also did not want to get married. Narad Muni also did not want him to get married. And Swayambhu Manu, another Mahajan, wanted him to get married. So when there was a tussle between 2 Mahajans, then there was a need for a 3rd Mahajan in the form of Lord Brahma. He came and settled it. So as per the time, place and circumstances, it was required for Priyavrat to rule the world, become an emperor. So as part of that, he eventually got married. And here we see Haryashvas and Sevalasvas, without even consulting their father, Narad Muni had a very nice time preaching to them, and eventually they also get married. So when it comes to the desire for getting married, here what we are discussing is more or less with respect to Brahmachari versus Grahastha. Whereas we see Anga was very upset when his son became a demon. His son was Vena. He was upset that his son became a demon. He was greatly anxiety. In fact, literally, as it is said, he literally went to the forest, being disturbed by the activities of his son. Whereas Hiranyakashipu was disturbed that his son became a devotee. Anga was disturbed that his son became a demon instead of a devotee, and Hiranyakashipu was disturbed that his son became a demon instead of a devotee. That was, the expectations were like that. Of course, when it comes to devotee and a demon, that's quite contrast, and it's a very paradigm shift. It's polarized. It's a very contrast. Whereas when it comes to Brahmacharya versus Grahastha, ultimately both are tools or mediums for self-realization. So when Daksha getting angry on Narad Muni, that instead of his sons becoming Grahasthas, they became Brahmachari, this was not acceptable, because in either way, they are getting self-realization. If they are perfecting their lives, whether it is through Grahastha ashram or whether they are perfecting their lives through Brahmachari ashram, if they are perfecting their lives, then Daksha should not have been disturbed. In one of the translations, Prabhupada explains, the Shavalasvas followed their brothers, Haryashvas, 10,000 of them, never to return back, which means they perfected their lives, never to return back. So as long as if they have perfected their lives, Daksha should not have been angry. But Prabhupada explains, even in the next purport also it comes, and the previous section also Prabhupada explains, that the animosity between parents of devotees and the Krishna consciousness movement has existed since time immemorial. even Narad Muni was not spared. Animosity between the parents of devotees and versus Krishna consciousness movement. And Prabhupada says that so many parents of brahmacharis, so many parents of devotees who have joined, they come and complain. Even in the recent times, we can see, maybe during the COVID period, there was a wave. Somehow there were a lot of interviews of parents of devotees who became brahmacharis, and they started giving interviews saying that our sons have been taken away by the temple. So unfortunately, there was these kind of accusations, and as a result of that, there were other devotees who also made sort of what we can say a refutation in order to refute this, which is a reality in one sense, to explain the facts that it is a voluntary movement. Ultimately, each living entity is getting a chance to perfect his life, and one comes to this movement, joins this movement voluntarily. So that is why Prabhupada explains, initially the parents express anger. Eventually, sometimes when it can go into different directions, sometimes they even threaten their children in terms of, you will not be able to see me, or I'll drink poison, and so many things are there. Or the other way around, they sometimes express helplessness. That without you, how can we survive? How can we live? So either they threaten or express their helplessness. But if one maintains the determination, then eventually this very same parents learn to respect the principles. Eventually they begin to appreciate, and many of them even personally practice Krishna consciousness themselves, which is a fact as we see in the entire community and in many other places. It may start with anger, but eventually when we understand, it is the devotees preach as well-wishers. When they understand this aspect, they are not here to exploit, but they are here to actually promote the further journey of the living entity. When the parents understand this, eventually they come to a stage of practicing themselves. And that's why Prabhupada explains, the duty of a father to his son is to give complete freedom. Duty of a father to his son, this is about marriage, is to give complete freedom when there is, after he has, this is particularly after receiving spiritually advanced instructions by the spiritual master. Giving complete freedom after receiving spiritual instructions or spiritual training by the spiritual master. That is the duty of a father with respect to the marriage. So particularly in this particular verse, Prabhupada explains about the 3 debts, freedom to 3 debts. This is what Daksha is arguing about, that Daksha is arguing with Narad Muni, you have sent them away, they have not even cleared their 3 debts. What are the 3 debts? The 3 debts to saintly persons, to the demigods, and to their father. So the debts to the saintly persons can be relieved by one performing celibacy, undergoing brahmacharya and celibacy. And the debts to the demigods can be relieved by performance of ritualistic ceremonies. And the debt to the father can be relieved by begetting children. So the Daksha's argument was that, Narad Muni, you have cheated my sons. They have not cleared these 3 debts, and you have simply sent them away by giving them instructions, and as a result of which they have renounced. They are now not performing this. They are not performing ritualistic ceremonies. They are not interested in begetting children. So as a result of this, Daksha was extremely angry. So very same purport in this purport, Prabhupada gives this beautiful understanding. Apparently Daksha did not know the final decision of the Shastras. So Daksha was angry that these 3 debts were not cleared. How we can understand, it's like Daksha is standing on the ground floor and saying that my sons were supposed to climb 3 floors, and I am seeing that they have not climbed, they have not gone through any of the stairs. So what is the reality is these sons have already gone through lift by the grace of Narad Muni. While Daksha is still at the ground floor looking that my sons have not climbed the staircase. So there is a regular process, that is how there is Pravritti Marg and Nivritti Marg. There is a regular process. But Daksha knew only that. That was one of his faults. He knew only that. He thought this is the only way to achieve self-realization. But Narad Muni already ensured for the perfection of Haryashvas and Shaivalasvas because they went through the lift process. Or another example we can understand, like if somebody has taken 3 loans, he's got some EMIs to pay throughout the 3 loans. Daksha is arguing that the 3 loans are still pending. Loans are still pending, EMIs are still yet to be paid off, and you have already sent them off. This is not acceptable. This is how Daksha is arguing. But again, there is a process of, in the banks they have this, they call it a write-off. Whatever debts were there, it is cleared at one go. Whatever was there pending, it is cleared. Of course, there might be some conditions based on which one is doing that. So there is a concept of write-off. Just like when Jagai and Madhai, they had it is described like a mountain load of sinful activities, sinful reactions were waiting for him. When Yamaraj was inquiring about the details, Chitragupta was saying hundreds and thousands of scribes, writers, hundreds and thousands of scribes are writing since a whole month, and still the list is not ending. In fact, the scribes are expressing that they are being exploited. They are expressing that they are being tortured, that we have to do overtime in order to keep track of the sins of Jagai and Madhai. So it was a mountain load of sins. And when Yamaraj heard what the mercy which was given to Jagai and Madhai, that in spite of Nityanand Prabhu being hit by Madhai on the head, in spite of that they were delivered. Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu personally said, invite Jagai and Madhai to the kirtans. They used to have special kirtans at Srivas Angan. So Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu invited Jagai and Madhai to come for the kirtans there, and there it is described that Jagai and Madhai particularly embraced Nityanand Prabhu, and then when being embraced by Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, their sins were graphically transferred. Gaura Sundar became Shyam Sundar, blackish, because accepting the sins of Jagai and Madhai. So when Yamaraj heard this, such a huge mountain load of sins simply being written off, Yamaraj literally fainted. He was not able to believe how this can happen. So Daksha knew only one process of Pravritti Marg, that they have to undergo this, or rather the freedom from the 3 debts, but he was not aware of the other process, and as a result of which he is expressing his anger and eventually even cursing Narad Muni. Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur gives a very beautiful purport to this particular verse, Deva Rishi Bhutaptaranam Pitranam. So he explains that one who takes shelter of Lord Mukunda, for him he is no more a servant of Deva, Rishi, Bhuta, Apta, Nranam, Pitranam. He is no more a servant he is no more obligated. Na kinkaro nayam rini charajan. He is no more obligated to the demigods, to the forefathers, to the saintly personalities, to the Bhutas, living entities and all that. So generally, from the Pravritti Marg perspective, there are 5 sacrifices which are conducted. Deva Yagya, Bhuta Yagya, Brahma Yagya, Nara Yagya and Pita Yagya for the forefathers. So this is from the Pravritti Marg perspective. But one who takes shelter, Gato Mukundam Pariharta Kartya, Sarvatmanaya Sharanam Sharanyam. One who takes complete shelter of Lord Mukunda, for him, what does he receive? Sarvatmanaya Sharanam Sharanyam, Gato Mukundam Pariharta Kartya. He is completely rid of all the obligations. Na kinkaro na ayam rinicharajan. He is no more a debtor. Whatever debts he had to pay for small, as from the Pravritti Marg, he is no more a debtor now. So Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur gives a beautiful analogy. A servant of of the emperor of the earth is not a servant of a small province. Or in our relatable understanding, a servant of a prime minister is not considered to be a servant of a a sarpanch in a small village. When he is a servant of a prime minister, then he cannot be considered as a servant for a sarpanch in a small village, in a small town, in a small state. He is a servant to a much superlative degree. So similarly, one who takes complete shelter of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, he is no more a debtor to the other aspects, Deva, Rishi, Bhuta, Apta, Nrinam and Pitrinam. That is how he explains. Another beautiful analogy as well as the verse from Srimad Bhagavatam. Yatha taror moola nishechanenam tripyandi tatskanda bhuja upashakham pranopahara cha yathendriyanam tathaiva sarvarhanam achyutejya. Just as the water is poured in the root of the tree, then the entire tree gets nourished. Tata bhuja upashakha. Skanda, bhuja and upashakha. The trunks, leaves, branches and the leaves. Everything gets nourished just by pouring water at the roots. Similarly, and another analogy as well, just by putting food in the stomach through the mouth, then all the senses of the body get nourished. In a similar way, when one worships the Supreme Personality of Godhead, then there is no need to separately perform the yajnas for Deva, Rishi, Bhuta, Pranam. One is no more obligated. That is how Srila Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur explains. Another beautiful point he explains, one should continue to perform the Vedic ritualistic activities until one becomes detached from material sense gratification and develops faith for hearing and chanting about me. Tavat karmani kurvita na nirvidyeta yavata mat katha shravanadova shraddha yavan na jayate. It means as long as one does not develop faith in hearing the glories of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, till then he is obligated to perform karma. But when one has intense faith in hearing about the glories of the Supreme Lord, then he is relieved from that. This is again explained in 11th canto. So, Daksha was angry that my sons have not been freed from the 3 debts. So what was actually Daksha's fault? We'll end with this last section. What was Daksha's fault? One, in the very same purport, Srila Prabhupada explains that Daksha did not understand the great service rendered by Narad Muni. Narad Muni was actually rendering a service to his sons by delivering them. And on top of that, Daksha was angry because he did not understand the service rendered by Narad Muni. Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur gives a story for this kite flying on the unwalled roof. It is described like a dumb boy. He is flying kite on the terrace and it does not have a wall. So he is just flying kite, his absorption in the kite and with the thread, he is just focused only on the kite. It is, Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur describes, even there are his friends who are encouraging him. Yes, you are just continue flying. And he was almost coming towards the edge where he was about to fall. One of his legs is just about to fall. So when there was a passerby, a wise gentleman, he immediately came on the top and pulled him, as well as described that he is breaking the thread as well and the sloop, firki. And then the boy becomes very angry and all the friends who are watching become very angry. And Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur gives a purport for this, saying that this wise gentleman wanted to do good for this boy. He was about to lose his life. He was about to fall off from the terrace. But when he tried to do good, unfortunately, rather than being grateful, the boy was angry. This is the unfortunate situation in this material world. A well-wisher, rather than expressing gratitude to a well-wisher, unfortunately the living entity conditioned soul expresses anger to the very same well-wisher. So this also we can understand, just like sometimes children, when they are taken to the doctor, if the doctor is giving a big injection, the child feels the doctor is my enemy. The well-wisher is treated like an enemy because of ignorance. The child is not aware. or when the parents tell children, it's the time to study. The children may want to play, they may want to do what they like, but when the parents are advising them what is good for them from the long-term perspective, Shreyas, the children may not understand. Similarly, Daksha here did not understand the great service rendered by Narad Muni. Another of his fault, that he came to conclusion without any inquiry or discussion. As soon as he heard Hareshwas and Shaivalas have been preached by Narad Muni, and they have gone, never to return again, there was so much anger surging in his heart, it was lurking, and at the moment he met Narad Muni, he just started pouring out. He just expressed his anger. There was no time for inquiry or any discussion. He just jumped to a conclusion. Like it is said, think twice before leap, right? Just like this lady, when she returned, basically the lady who had a small child and a pet mongoose in the house, and when she goes for some errands for the marketplace, and when she returns back, when she sees a child on the cradle, there are some blood stains around, and when she sees the mongoose having some blood stains in his mouth as well, immediately the lady concludes this mongoose must have done some mischief in terms of trying to attack my child, and as a result of which the mongoose was killed. And then later on, this lady comes to know that, there was a snake, then she sees the snake slithering away, and then she understands the entire scenario. So sometimes we jump to conclusion without inquiry and having some proper discussions, without which Daksha ended up being very angry. That was his third fault. He was angry and criticized a great Vaishnava. Expressing his anger, in the previous verse, Daksha addresses Narad Muni as a sadhu, non-saintly person. In this verse, he expresses Narad Muni as sinful person. In the next verse, he expresses Narad Muni as nirakrosha, without compassion. The very reason Narad Muni is traveling is out of compassion, not because of the curse of Daksha. He is traveling only out of compassion, but he is being described as without compassion. He is being described as without shame, and he is being described as offender to the Supreme Personality of Godhead. This is how Daksha is just pouring out, expressing the vengeance in his heart. He just expressing that. So he was angry and criticized a great Vaishnava. Unfortunately, he was standing in front of Narad Muni, and that he had to pay a very, very heavy price. So Daksha part 1 offended Shiva, got a goat's head. Punas Charvita Charvanana did the same thing again. Now, as Daksha part 2, he is offending Narad Muni, and obviously going to get has to pay a very heavy price for it. So, in terms of criticizing Vaishnavas, it's like even Saubari Muni, he ended up cursing, expressing anger and criticizing Garuda. So Garuda, as a Vaishnava, he just accepted. He had the power to counter curse, or he had the power to ensure that the curse will not have an effect. But still, as a Vaishnava, Garuda accepted the curse and tolerated. Similarly, Narad Muni has the power to counter curse, as well as has the power to ensure the curse will not have an effect. But great souls look for opportunities. Even if it is a curse, they can translate it, they can ensure that it becomes a blessing in disguise. So that is how Narad Muni acted, and which Prabhupada explains in the purport, that Narad Muni exhibited great tolerance, tolerating all accusations given by Daksha. And this is a quality of a great preacher. Not only just a preacher, anybody in Krishna consciousness may have to deal with this in terms of tolerating great accusations. As a Vaishnava, it's very natural, titikshava karunika, or as Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu explains, trinadapi sunichena taroriva sahishnuna. This is a very, very great quality required in order to sustain in Krishna consciousness, especially for the longer period of time. This is a very, very great quality required, because in this material world, we are always going to face oppositions. Oppositions is external as well as internal. Internal, when we say it's outside the community, sometimes it's within the community. It's not only just outside and within community, it is external as well as in the mind, as well as the struggles that one undergoes because of the anarthas that one possesses, the conditioned soul that the anarthas that one possesses. One goes through so much challenges, and if we do not develop this quality of tolerance, it is very difficult to continue further. And that is why Srila Prabhupada in Krishna book makes this famous statement: one's greatness has to be estimated by one's ability to tolerate provoking situations. One's greatness has to be estimated by one's ability to tolerate provoking situations. Lord Nityanand Prabhu tolerated Madhai hitting him. Similarly, Narad Muni could have told Daksha that, do you know I have delivered your entire dynasty? If he wanted to express the facts, he could have done so many things. And now also he is coming again to allow Daksha to vent out, so that afterwards he'll feel a sort of a remorse, and he may be saved. So Daksha is still concerned about Narad Muni is still concerned about Daksha's deliverance. And this is only possible when one is selfless in nature. Narad Muni ignored the accusations that was raised towards him because he was focused on Daksha's deliverance. If Narad Muni would have been focused on the accusations, Daksha would not have been delivered. He was focusing on his deliverance, as a result of which he accepted to tolerate the accusations. And that is, as a part of Vaishnava dealings, this is a very great quality which one requires in order to sustain in Krishna consciousness. So eventually the takeaway from this is that one can understand, just like Daksha ended up criticizing a great Vaishnava, this is something one has to be very conscious. Like that's why we discussed glories of Daksha. Daksha was not an ordinary person. He was a personality who got darshan of the Supreme Lord. Still, whoever one is, if we criticize Vaishnavas, it's a very, very great unfortunate situation, and one has to pay a very heavy price. Second, as a Vaishnava, one can learn, one can try to cultivate the quality of tolerance, particularly tolerating the accusations, especially when it comes to preaching. And if we are rendering service, this is another aspect. When we are rendering service, many times we may be concerned only about the intention that I am doing a great service. But if it is causing a very bad impact, then one maybe need to be conscious of the impact that one is causing by the service. Narad Muni did a great service, but the impact felt on Daksha, he was in great anxiety, he was very upset and very angry. So in part of our dealings, of course Narad Muni could handle it. In part of our dealings, we can be conscious not only of our intention, but also whatever best possible the impact of our service. And finally, if we are on the recipient, that means if we are on the part of, if we are disturbed by others' service, like Daksha is disturbed, expressing disturbance. If we are disturbed by others' service, it is always best to inquire and discuss rather than jumping to conclusions immediately. Hare Krishna. So we just discussed about some recap of this particular verse. In terms of this is talking about the further secondary creation, Prachetas coming out, and Prachetas coming out, eventually getting married to Marisha, begetting Daksha. This is Daksha part 2. We discussed about the glories of Daksha. We discussed about, although Daksha was glorious, but in front of Narad Muni, he was like a firefly in front of the sun. So in front of Narad Muni's glories, Daksha was hardly anything. At the same time, we discussed the duties of a father with respect to marriage of the son, and the freedom from 3 debts. Daksha knew only one aspect, one pravriti marg. He felt how to get freed from the debt to saintly personalities, to the demigods as well as father. This was the only aspect he knew. He did not understand that one can get rid of all these debts by taking shelter of Lord Mukunda. Finally, we discussed Daksha's faults, that Daksha was basically extremely angry and ended up criticizing a great Vaishnava. He did not understand the great service rendered by Narad Muni, and he jumped to conclusion immediately without even inquiring what happened. And finally, it was Punas Punas Charvata Charananam. Earlier he ended up offending Shiva, and now he ended up offending Narad Muni. And that is the great unfortunate situation which he did by criticizing a great Vaishnava. Hare Krishna. Grantraj Srimad Bhagavatam ki jai, Srila Prabhupada ki jai, Gaura Bhakta Vrinda ki jai. Hare Krishna. Anybody has any comments or any questions? Yes, Prabhu.
Thank you for such a nice class, Prabhu. You were talking about this offense to Vaishnavas. So what happens in our life, maybe in the beginning when we were new, or maybe even after that, and now also, maybe sometime back we have offended a devotee, and maybe like very gross kind of offense. And now we are lamenting, we have a lot of lament in our heart. And we know in Bhagavad Gita that, lamentation, you can get rid of, I'm going to say, whatever sinful activities you have done, just by lamentation, devotee, gets rid. So now maybe we are not in position to go back to the devotee and beg forgiveness, because we are just we just feel it's awkward, how to go and just, and so my question is that, is it just okay to carry that lamentation in the heart that at one point of time, I had offended that Vaishnava, and now, so, or we have to just go and anyway and just beg forgiveness, or what is the stand about that?
It depends a lot on what is the nature of the offense, the degree of the offense, the severity of the offense and all that. But in any case, if it's a general part, as a Vaishnava, it is always best. The feeling of remorse is like it is described, it burns away the sin, like it is described, the fire of knowledge, it burns ignorance. Similarly, the feeling of remorse can burn that. But whenever there is an opportunity, ideally speaking, one should act. It is described, one should go towards the Vaishnava and beg for forgiveness. We should not feel that, when we say we feel awkward, it is to some extent our ego does not allow us. Because we should not be worried about whether the other person is feeling awkward. If we have it, if we have that feeling genuinely in our heart, we can just go and express our heartfelt feeling, saying that earlier I did a great mistake. You see, for example, Sarvabhauma Bhattacharya, when he is preaching, when he is speaking with Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu is about to go to South India. So Sarvabhauma Bhattacharya expresses that earlier when I saw Ramananda Rai, because I was myself an impersonalist, I used to make fun of him. I did not consider him very significant. But now that after your preaching, now that I understand the value of devotional service, I am not able to estimate the greatness of Ramananda Rai. He is able to express that. So in general, when one is able to recognize that we have committed some offense earlier, it is always recommended to particularly go to the devotee and express our heartfelt feelings. The devotee may not take it seriously, that is his magnanimity. But we should not consider that he will feel awkward. We can express our heartfelt feelings. And if it's a geographical distance, maybe whenever we get an opportunity during yatras or sometime, whenever there is a possibility to meet, or in case it's too far a distance and something is not happening, whenever we get a chance, or if it is on a phone call or something like that, it's a good gesture which one will actually feel very light within the heart after expressing that. Otherwise, lamentation may go throughout the life, and one may still not be clear and sure. Did I convey, or am I really remorse? Am I feeling that remorse? But once we express, we cannot understand the magic that happens. Just like it is easy to express in front of the Lord, but when we express in front of a devotee, it takes a great heart, because one is concerned about the image. To in front of the Lord, it's very easy, but in front of a devotee, then it really requires to gather that courage, which we may sometimes feel it's awkward. But we do our part, whether any devotee will not laugh at it, any genuine devotee. Just like Madhai was told to seek forgiveness from Nityanand Prabhu. Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu says, you have to seek forgiveness from Nityanand Prabhu. You have hate him. And when Madhai is expressing his guilt, Nityanand Prabhu does not even take it seriously. So those who are genuine Vaishnava will not even take it seriously. That is their magnanimity. We should not expect that. In case they are angry, like Narad Muni, one has to have the ability to tolerate that anger, because one has done certain wrong thing. After doing something wrong, if we expect that you are a Vaishnava, why are you angry? Then it may not be a good factor, because he can deal however he wants, but we have to know how we have to behave. So it is always recommended to approach the Vaishnava and do the needful as far as possible. Hare Krishna. Yes, yeah, you can take.
Hare Krishna. Hare Krishna. So, as you said, that Daksha was very expert, and also you said that about his lineage, and how intelligent he was. So sometimes it happens at least with me as well. Like we read the scriptures, we hear lectures, but at the same time, I have ego as well. So when we deal with people like that, so sometimes this ego mixed with the knowledge that I have. So how I can take care about with that I should not kind of come to wrong conclusion, or when I deal with people or talk with them, I should not come to the wrong conclusions.
Yeah, the antidote for ego is association with Vaishnavas. When we associate with Vaishnavas, it is but natural egos will clash, and when egos clashes, it pains the heart. But the whole process of cultivation of devotional service it's ultimately a training process. Throughout the whole life, we are trying to, whether we are in our first year of Krishna consciousness, or we are in our 5th year or 10th year or 25th year or 50th year, at any point of time, this is, as long as the ego is there, it's going to clash. The more one understands that when this clash happens, ultimately there is some purification which is happening. If one doesn't focus on that, one will be only egocentric and might even apparently leave devotional service or leave association of devotees. Sometimes people feel, because I am with devotees, there is so much of clash. If I can do service alone, I can. It can be so easy. It's like if somebody wants to drive a vehicle, testing can be on a playground maybe, but the final one is, if one is expert or not, has to be known if he is able to drive in a marketplace, in a busy crowded marketplace. That's how it is tested, whether he is able to maneuver. Similarly, one can render service alone. Of course, that also Prabhupada says it's a hallucination. There is other aspects to it. But nevertheless, to do service along with devotees is sometimes a great challenge, because the egos come into play. And then with respect to equality, that somebody is 5 years senior, somebody is 10 years senior. But after some time, everybody feels everybody knows many things. When we know similar knowledge, then one starts equating everything. And that is where we find, when we take things for granted, that is where offenses happen. It's very difficult to offend senior Vaishnavas, because we have some awe and reverence. We keep some distance, safe distance as they call. But when we consider ourselves equal to many, then when we take things for granted, then there is a lot of possibilities of that offense. So when it is with Vaishnavas, although the ego may hurt, although it may be difficult, one has to know this is a great chance for purification. Just like you put stones in a jar, and when you shake them, when the stones are rubbing against each other, as long as friction is there, there is pain. But that friction is actually softening our rough edges. That friction which is happening with the devotee is softening our rough edges. That means we are getting shaped, we are getting molded better than what we are gross. So for the coal to become a diamond, it has to go through, and it has to be put in the fire. So from that perspective, with association of Vaishnavas, it's a great solution ultimately, even for the ego. Because otherwise it may be very easy trying to do things alone. With Vaishnavas, it may be challenging, but that is a whole process of cultivation. Hare Krishna. Thank you very much. Thank you very much. Srila Prabhupada ki jai, Gaura Bhakta Vrinda ki jai. Hare Krishna.